Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and tonight I'll be talking about Suicide Dolls. Released in 1999, Suicide Dolls is the final entry in what I like to call the faux snuff Japanese death trilogy, of course directed by Tamakichi Anaru. Now, if that name sounds familiar to my listeners out there, it's because I've covered the previous two entries of this trilogy, the first being Tumbling Doll of Flesh, and of course the second entry being Woman's Flesh, My Red Guts. Both incredibly fucked up and degenerate films. I highly recommend you gorehounds check out if you have the stomach for it. In those previous reviews, I explained that because Tamakichi Anaru's previous directing experience mostly came from Jav films and pornography, he kind of carried it over into the first two films in this trilogy. More so in Tumbling Doll of Flesh, because that is directly about a porn crew that kills and, sexually abuses, mutilates, and then fucks the dead body of their actress. The second film is kind of like this one in the sense that it's just straight about suicide, but there is a heavy amount of genital mutilation that plays into it, so I kind of considered it a Jav film because of that. However, this film completely stands on its own because there is no hypersexual violence. It's very nihilistic and dark and kind of depressing at the same time because it's just about suicide. The shock is there, of course, because the death scenes are filmed really shockingly well, but again, it's a totally different tone compared to the first two movies, because the first two movies are just like, well, the first one is straight up exploitive as fuck, so it gives off that live leak feel. The second one is kind of experimental and surreal, whereas this one, it was weird. It just tonally was completely different, and the ending segment too is not like anything I've seen in the previous two films. It's a really, it's a pretty fast kind of movie, but it does kind of drag a little bit. It's only about 56 minutes to an hour, but I feel like it could have been trimmed down. It could have been the same length as the second film, My Red Guts, which was about 42 minutes, and I think it would have been fine. But it's still a very interesting movie. I think you guys should check out if you're into extreme Japanese cinema or extreme cinema in general. But another interesting thing about this movie I found was there's very little information about it. Like, of course, the director's name is on it, but I couldn't find any cast or anything like that. And, out of the three films, this is the one that no one seems to really talk about. There's, I think, only 3 reviews total on IMDb. A couple Letterboxd ones here and there that I've seen on a Google search, but personally I don't have Letterboxd, so I have no idea. But out of the 3 films, this is the one I knew the least about. And strangely enough, when Massacre Video released this DVD, they released a second one called Making of Suicide Dolls, which is a documentary about how this was obviously filmed and put together. And through that documentary, you find some interesting shit. Like, this was pretty much filmed in only like 3 days. So it's pretty wild that you get 3 segments and it was filmed in exactly that, 3 days. But like what they got done with, especially the final segment, it's just fucking brutal. You don't get a lot of footage of Tamakichi Anaru, which is kind of weird. He seems a little elusive, but like this movie's pretty wild. Again, you don't really, it's actually kind of funny. You don't need to buy the Making of Suicide Dolls to see this documentary. If you got the DVD for just Suicide Dolls from Massacre Video, they kindly put the documentary on this DVD. It runs for about an hour, well worth your time. And if you have to get one DVD, I'd say just get this one, because you kind of get everything. You get the movie, you get the documentary, you get a still gallery, and of course you get the trailers for other Massacre Video releases. However, I do recommend, if you pick this up, try to find it for a good price, because I believe it is out of print. I think I managed to scoop my copy for $12.99, but last time I checked, these go for about like $60. So if you can find them, pick them up, because they're interesting to have to the collection. And also, when it comes to DVD cases and quality, I put Massacre Video up there. I kind of call them the supreme of horror DVD releases, because they put out some really rare shit, and it seems like it will only be out for a while before it's completely gone, and then the prices go up insane amounts. So again, if you can find this for a decent price, pick it up, because they make really well put together DVDs. And again, you get that sick reversible cover art where you get the original VHS cover. However, in my personal opinion, I think the DVD cover on this one's better than the VHS flip cover. But with, a movie like Tumbling Doll of Flesh, I'd have to say the VHS cover is a lot cooler. But it's to each their own, apples and oranges. It doesn't really mean anything. At the end of the day, it's what you get on the disc, and is it worth it? I don't think this would be worth a $64, $65 price point, especially considering how recent this DVD release is. I think it only came out in like, I want to say 2021, 2022, some shit like that. But it's definitely cool. I mean, they do put out good shit, like I said. So, if you can find it for a reasonable price, I'd say 20, 25 would be max what I would pay on it. I think that is what I paid for it after shipping and handling. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What the movie ultimately is about, it's funny, we're 5 minutes in and I'm only getting into it now, but it's a really short movie. It's essentially 3 segments, 3 different women all committing suicide. The first one, you get this, I assume, college age woman, and she's in her new, she just moved into this new house, and it's a lot of like her calling people. I assume it's her parents, and I think either a fellow drug addict or her dealer. And you find out she's addicted to crystal meth. She's like smoking and tweaking the fuck out in her house. She also finds a gun in this house, like a 44 caliber revolver. And, throughout the course of these film segments, finally when it gets to the end of hers, she basically, after smoking a bunch of meth, brains herself with a fucking revolver. Actually, she tries to call someone a few times. I think it's her either boyfriend, drug addict friend, or drug dealer. I didn't quite pick up on it. No one picks up, and then she finally spins the cylinder and blows her fucking head off. Probably one of my least favorite deaths in the entire movie, because with a 44, I was expecting a little bit more damage to the head. It was just a bit of blood. But then again, how death looks in a movie versus real life is very different. So it very well could be realistic. But from what I've read and heard about 44s, and I guess Taxi Driver kind of puts this in my fucking head, especially when he goes on that final assault at the end of the movie. I expect to see chunks fly when that shit goes off, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just a piece of shit. I don't fucking know. But again, it was the weakest death in my opinion. Could have been a lot gorier, but we move on to the next segment, which is basically this woman who was married. She's in the middle of basically getting a divorce when we get to her segment, because she's accumulated this massive debt, and then her husband just doesn't want to deal with her, so he files for divorce. The remaining segment is her pacing around her apartment, scratching at the wall, turning the lights on and off. And then she finally ties like a rope around a banister, or I guess it would be like, the rope on a bathrobe, and she ties it around a banister in the kitchen, and she hangs herself. This one, again, not my favorite death in the entire movie, but it is probably one of the more uncomfortable ones because of how long she's just swinging there. And of course, her bodily fluids release, so a bunch of piss goes down her leg, and then it just cuts, which I thought was pretty fucked up, and kind of more realistic than, again, the 44 to the head. The final installment is this, when this actually kind of goes full circle, so maybe it does tie into the trilogy, I could be wrong, but the final segment is an adult film actress who has decided to film her suicide. I believe it's Harikari. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize, but basically, or I think seppuku, she basically slices her guts open, and I thought this was the most interesting part of the entire movie. The reason why is because we get a lot more dialogue from this woman, and it's very strange because the whole time she seems very happy. She doesn't seem very depressed or anything. She seems more intrigued about seeing what's inside of her body as opposed to like the act of dying. She has like a very heads or tails approach to it. Very interesting and jarring. It's also intercut with scenes of her film crew setting up the ritual suicide site with incense and the ceremonial knife. We get more interview shots of her and the cameraman or director talking about why she's doing it or what she thinks about death in specific. We get to hear her thoughts about it. It was really weird and really kind of creepy, especially playing off this whole idea that this is supposed to be like real footage, right? Like it's just really creepy to have someone be so straightforward on an interview like this and then go right into it. She proceeds to then, rip her fucking guts open with a knife. And then once she's on the ground, she starts pulling her intestines out. And then this results in her pulling her own eyeball out of her fucking head, to which she finally is pronounced dead. And again, I think it is the goriest death. The most effects work went into it. Therefore, I'd have to rate this as the highest one in the movie because it was just so what the fuck. It was insane. Really, really good effects work there. But that's not all. The final segment of this movie we kind of get a throwback to Tumbling Doll of Flesh in terms of soundtrack. For those of you who've seen the review or seen the movie, you'll know that there's this heavy, primal, industrial soundtrack throughout Tumbling Doll of Flesh. It kind of shows up here in Suicide Dolls. In the final segment of the movie, we get an almost stop motion animation of all these little weird fucking dolls. I don't know what you'd call them, but like dolls, you know, like, and they all just get fucking eviscerated and hung and shit, and it's just so jarring and really kind of creepy. Like, it's the creepiest part of the whole movie, and I think really amazing, actually. But you get this booming fucking industrial soundtrack, which I thought was killer, which you don't see for the rest of the movie. So like the first three segments, like the shooting, the hanging, and the seppuku, no music at all. It's pretty realistic. It's all filmed from like fixed camera angles, so it almost feels like voyeuristic in nature, which kind of adds to the creepiness. This final segment goes balls to the wall trippy with fucking crazy sound effects and pitched up voices, and then it just ends. It was really fucking weird. And as a whole, I think the second half of this movie is really the strong part. The first half kind of drags a little bit, but not to knock the first two acts, because I think what did save at least the first two acts from being a total drag is there's this underlying sense of tension the whole way through, because you know where these are going to go. Like, you know from the title of this movie, these chicks are going to commit suicide. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. So that prolonging the event kind of adds this like underlying tension throughout like the segments, which I got to applaud the director, because it did kind of keep me sitting there like, all right, when's it gonna fucking happen, let's just get this over with type shit. But yeah, the final half, I think it's just because it was so like crazy and weird and borderline trippy, both the seppuku and the doll segment, they were just so crazy and out there that it kind of saved the movie, in my opinion, because if the last two segments played out like the first two, this would probably be my least favorite in the trilogy. But to determine favorite is even weird in of itself, because these are very niche movies. When it comes to recommending them, it would be really hard to do, because I don't think this is for the average film viewer. This is definitely for people of extreme tastes. But out of the whole trilogy, I mean, each one has its own thing to offer. Like I said, the first one plays out like a fucking snuff porno. The second one plays out like an experimental suicide video. And this one plays out as like a voyeuristic look into suicide, you know what I mean? They're all different, and they all have different things to say and offer. I'd probably rank this under my quote favorite one, Tumbling Doll of Flesh, so probably second in the trilogy, because even though it did run on a little too long, I think it was more thought-provoking than, let's say, fucking My Red Guts. Sorry for the brain fart there. I'm pretty fucking ripped, and also kind of taken aback from that ending, ladies and gentlemen. Again, it was a very fucked up ending, the seppuku, but yeah, I'd probably say this is the second best one in the trilogy. Really interesting. I wish that it was cut down a little bit so it would just move a little more, faster, because it just could have been a little shorter. But other than that, it wasn't horrible. Again, if you're into extreme films, I'd recommend this. I'd probably give it about like a 7, maybe a 7.5. Check it out. And again, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, if you can find it for a decent price, about $20-$25, scoop it for that. Avoid picking up The Making of Suicide Dolls unless you really need a physical for that, like a case, because like I said, this DVD right here already has the documentary on there. And come to think of it, it might actually be the most stacked in terms of features massacre video DVD I have. That's not, of course, counting stuff like Fetus and shit, or Flesh Contagium that came with the soundtracks. But again, out of the 3 films in Tamakichi Anaru's faux snuff death trilogy, this is the only one that was loaded to the brim with special features, including a full hour-long documentary. So like I said, unless you want to spend the extra money, you can totally avoid picking that one up. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And like I said, if you haven't seen the other 2 reviews or the other 2 films and you got the stomach for it, check it out. Honestly, don't know what I'll be reviewing next. There's a lot of shit on the plate, but hopefully it's something you guys enjoy. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, pack a fat bowl, rip it, clear your mind if you've seen this shit and you're totally fucked out of your head. But until then, have a good one. Peace.